In order to understand fetal circulation, you need a very good basis in regular circulation. You need to understand that the fetal lungs do not work. By the way, I'm not uploading that part of the video. We're starting here. Hello, guys. Welcome to part 2 of the lecture. We're talking about fetal circulation. The fetus's lungs do not work. Fetus's lungs don't work. Okay. Where does normal physiology take us? Right? Normal physiology takes us, like we said, starting at the IVC. We go into the right atrium, into the right ventricle, into the lungs. And I realized I was supposed to do this in blue, but nothing's going my way today. It doesn't matter. You know why it doesn't matter? Because I don't care about you. I care very deeply about you guys. I just don't want to crash my car into a tree that was calling my name on the way home. So we're going to keep going. From the lungs, we will re-enter the left atrium into the heart through the left atrium, yes. The left ventricle will pump out to the body. And over here, I'm going to make an important distinction that we have the aorta. I'm actually going to make it part of the pathway. And over here, I will make it part of the pathway that we have the pulmonary artery. You guys can see where this is going, right? Because what doesn't work? These don't work in the fetus, right? Aorta to the body, and the body sort of does its own thing, and then eventually all veins lead back to the... Not all veins lead back to Rome. All roads lead back to Rome, and all veins lead to the vena cava. Very good. Now, the body does its own thing means what? The body will turn into arteries and arterioles and capillaries, and then venules will turn into veins, right? And that's sort of the little thing that you just have to memorize. That the aorta turns into arteries, turns into arterioles, turns into capillaries, turns into venules, turns into veins, right? The veins go back to the IVC. These are the moments that you wonder, why can't the baby just live by itself? Why can't you just do something beneficial with your life? Get a job, kid, right? The lungs don't work. So if the lungs don't work, baby has to hijack mom, right? Baby has to be a freaking freeloader, like always. And we do that with 3 things. Number 1 is the foramen ovale. Number 2 is the ductus arteriosus. And number 3 is the ductus venosus. Literally, the venous duct, the arteriolar duct, and the oval hole. Yes? Yes. Okay. The book calls it the patent foramen ovale. That is a medical error. You're not supposed to call it patent when it's in a kid. If it's in an adult and it persists after childhood, then you call it patent. It's called a PFO, and you can repair that. And do you guys want to know what medical specialty repairs that? Interventional cardiology. I had a neighbor who had a PFO. He had a stroke because of it. Because what happens is that your body actually forms natural blood clots, right? Those blood clots form in your venous system. They track back to your heart, and they eventually plug into the right atrium, right? And if you have a PFO, it's a hole between the right atrium and the left atrium. Normally, blood clots will go to the lung if they're small enough, and they'll get attacked by enzymes. They'll get broken up, right? That's sort of the way that you protect against clots. But since he has this hole in his heart, the clot jumped to his left atrium and went up to his brain. Yeah.
Does it have any valves similar to the veins?
It's a hole. So it's just a hole. Yeah. Okay. So the foramen ovale is a hole, a foramen, a foramina, right? It is a hole that exists in the interatrial septum, the septum between the 2 atria. So it connects the right atrium to the left atrium. This is the foramen ovale. Yes? Thank you. Say yes! Foramina valley. And you basically bypass all of the things that would even lead into the lung. You don't even let it get there. Right. I have a giant fire hose, and I'm aiming it at a wall with a hole in it. Does all the water go through the hole? No. Some of the blood will continue to escape into the right ventricle. So you need something else that when the right ventricle pumps, right, the right ventricle doesn't pump it into the lungs. Now, the lungs in the fetus are filled with fluid. That's a very high pressure environment. And instead of going into that high pressure environment, you would rather go into a low pressure environment that's already circulating. So in the baby, this isn't true in adults. This is not true in adults. But in the fetus, the developing fetus, the circulatory system of the body is lower pressure than the circulatory system of the lungs. The lungs are very high pressure. So that high pressure actually walls off the fluid from getting that way. So what happens is that when the right ventricle pumps, it's trying to pump into the pulmonary artery that has very high pressure. But it just so happened, just so happens that the universe created this magical pathway between the right ventricle, between the pulmonary artery and the aorta. You bypass everything. You get past everything, right? Yes? Make sense? Good, good. You guys are getting used to it. This is known as the ductus arteriosus. The ductus arteriosus. Does that make sense? The arteriolar duct, the duct between two arteries, and the foramina valley. Now, how do we illustrate this inside of the heart? Here is the heart. Here is the septum. Here are the ventricles and the atria. This is where the foramina valley would be right here. And the blood that does escape through here is going to pump into the, I'm going to draw this accurately. If you're wondering how they actually look, they kind of look like this. That's the pulmonary artery. And this is the aorta that crosses either over or under it. I forget the absolute anatomical position, whatever it is. Kill me, I guess, right? And there's an artery that connects the two of them together. And that artery that connects the two of them is the ductus arteriosus. Yes? Good. Okay. So we can bypass the lungs through the foramina valley, and anything that makes it past the foramina valley into the pulmonary artery will be blocked off by the increased pressure of the lungs. So it's going to force the blood that way. And if you go that way, you don't want to go back because there's a valve here, right? There's the pulmonic valve. The valve here prevents you from going back, so that it can only go that way. Yes? How do these close? How do these close? Very interesting thing. When the baby is born, you suction out all of the fluid from its lungs, it starts to breathe air, and that pulmonary pressure drops to the floor. So now it's way easier to go to the pulmonary artery than into the aorta that is now pumping massive amounts of blood every minute. So now we start going to the lungs, going to the lungs, going to the lungs. If you don't use it, you lose it. And interestingly enough, I want you guys to all look up something. I want you to look up the ligamentum arteriosum. The ligamentum arteriosum is an artery that wraps the pulmonary artery and the aorta together and anchors them to one another so that they stay in the same place. It is the remnant of what used to be the ductus arteriosus in adults. It is a connective tissue remnant of the ductus arteriosus. The ligamentum arteriosum, yeah. Crazy.
So it just shrivels up on it?
It just closes and forms a connective tissue band because arteries are made of, their walls are made of connective tissue. So it degenerates and turns into a connective tissue band that connects the two arteries together. Crazy. This doesn't solve one problem. There's one problem we haven't talked about here, and it's very important. Where's the baby getting? Oxygen. circulating, hasn't gone to the lungs. Baby's not breathing air. Where's the baby getting oxygen from? In a way that you don't need to understand. Somewhere down this line, baby throws a collection of vessels. And these vessels go towards the placenta. The placenta, remember, is the interface between mom's blood supply and baby's blood supply. And this is inside of the umbilical cord. The umbilical cord connects baby to placenta. Placenta connects mom to baby, right? So we throw a vessel to the placenta, we pick up oxygen here, and we send a vessel back. And it plugs into the IVC. It plugs into the venous system. Yes? These are respectively called the umbilical vein and umbilical artery. Which one's which? The one that leaves is the artery, because the arteries travel away from the heart. So look, this coily one that I drew, that's the artery going towards mom. This is another example of an artery that carries deoxygenated blood, and a vein that carries oxygenated blood. I want to make a distinction here. This vein is 100% oxygenated. 100%, like the pulmonary vein inside of adults. Picked up as much oxygen as it could from the placenta. When it plugs into here, through a port known as the ductus venosus, which is how the umbilical vein plugs back into the fetal circulation, right? This is the ductus venosus. What's going to happen to the oxygen saturation? It's going to drop. You are in the circulation of the baby that doesn't get oxygen from anywhere else. The oxygen saturation here is probably like 40%. So now the moment you get inside of here, your oxygen saturation drops to maybe 70%, let's say. For my people who have studied the entire curriculum and have seen these videos before, do you now understand why this is adult hemoglobin and this is fetal hemoglobin? Because at an oxygen saturation of 70%, at a partial pressure of oxygen that's lower than what is normally in the adults, you need to be able to hold 100% of the oxygen. Because when you plug in, you're only at 70, which is, let's say, about 70 ppm, or mmHg, millimeters of mercury. So at that partial pressure of oxygen, you need to be able to hold on to anything, because that's the most you'll ever get. If this were adult hemoglobin, you would enter the baby and immediately drop off the oxygen into the bloodstream, and it would get nowhere. Do you guys see why fetal hemoglobin has to have a higher affinity? If that went over your head, we will study it together. When we talk about the respiratory system, we will study it again in protein dynamics in biochemistry. Don't worry about it if it didn't go over your head, but I want you to know that oxygen is carried in much higher efficiency in the baby than an adult. And that is because of 2,3-BPG. That is the important molecule there. 2,3-BPG binds hemoglobin in adults, but does not bind fetal hemoglobin. And you can imagine now that 2,3-BPG actually decreases the efficiency for oxygen. Affinity for oxygen, sorry. So, how does the child avoid the lungs? Very simple. When we make it to the heart, we immediately hop to the left side. We don't want to deal with the right side of circulation because that's where we're going to the lungs. We will make it into the pulmonary artery a little bit. And since the lungs are so backed up in such high pressure and there's so much fluid there, we escape into the aorta. In order to get oxygen, we collect all of the blood at the bottom of our venous system, send an artery to mom, oxygenate, send a vein back, and plug it into the venous system. This is the foramina valley, this is the ductus arteriosus, and this is the ductus venosus, along with the umbilical artery and umbilical vein. It makes sense if you follow it. It does really make sense. I want you guys to think that there's a window, there's a bridge, and there's an oxygenation path. That's it. There's a window, a bridge, and a path for oxygen. Yes?
Okay, so I've heard some people kind of say, like, the lungs still need some kind of blood just to kind of give, like, nutrients or something.
Right.
Some gets in there.
Yeah.
So, okay.
I'm not saying it's 100% zero. Like I said, it is not, all this is not going to go through the hole. Okay. So all of that is not going to go through the hole either. A tiny bit of it will make it there. You know what I mean?
Will it make itself to the left, like the amount of blood that gets into the lungs? Will it make it?
It'll go all the way around.
Atrium?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, once you're in there, like you can't go back. You know, it'll make it all the way around. Questions, comments, concerns? Yes.
One of them bypasses the liver, right?
Huh?
One of them bypasses the liver. Right?
Something like that. Not even I know those details. It doesn't matter to me. It shouldn't matter to you. Honestly, that's not always true. Some things really don't matter to me, and they should really matter to you. Like cars. Not even paying attention.
I looked into that when they said that one's not considered a real appearance.
All right. Any other questions? Anyone? Let's talk about drum roll. There you go. You guys are so lame. Oh, there we go. Let's talk about gestation. Okay. So, gestation is measured in trimesters, correct? First trimester, second trimester, third trimester, things like that. How long is the gestation period of a human? How many months? 9? Wrong. 40 weeks, which is 10 months. It's not 9. I don't know why everyone says 9. Let's count the weeks together. 1. No. In what world is 40 weeks 9 months? Yeah, can you deliver at 36? Yeah, you can. Can you deliver at 38? Yeah, you can. Can you deliver at 40? Yeah, you can. 10 months. Okay? More specifically, they say 280 days. Wait, but 280 days is not 10 months. It's 9 and change. But they say 40 weeks, right? I am more partial to 40 weeks. Right? First trimester. At 3 weeks, you've got your heartbeat. I don't necessarily agree with this. Medical textbooks say 4 weeks. And I believe medical textbooks more than I do Kaplan about medicine. And they say at 8 weeks, you've got a fetus. The second trimester, is anyone here a mom? Okay, no.
I'm dad.
There you go. All right, you can probably tell me. The second trimester is really when stuff starts hitting the fan.
Yeah, it gets weird.
Really when stuff starts hitting the fan, because this is really where you have tremendous growth. The fetus is feeding off of mom like no tomorrow. Fatigue, headaches, you are either gaining, losing weight, this, that, cravings, blah, 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 whatever. Everything that is ridiculous starts to happen here. Goes absolutely insane, right? The fetus begins moving. You can see a human face. And the toes and fingers elongate. Hassan, what surah? Yeah. Yeah, we'll talk about that. How do fingertips form? How do fingerprints? How do fingerprints form? It is formed by the intimate interaction of you closing your hands inside of your mother and the literal pressure of the amniotic fluid on your body. The literal pressure of amniotic fluid inside of your mother creates a unique indent inside of your finger that lasts for your entire lifetime. In the Quran, which was, as people say, written, even though it was not written, it was spoken by God, right? In the Quran, it was said by God and revealed to the Prophet, peace be upon him, 1,400 plus years ago. There's a verse that says, أَيَحْسَبُ الْإِنسَانُ أَلَّن نَجْمَعَ عِظَامَهُ بَلَى قَادِرِينَ عَلَىٰ أَن نُسَوِّيَ بَنَانَهُ. I don't even know if that's correct. This might be wrong. But it says, بَلَى قَادِرِينَ عَلَىٰ أَن نُسَوِّيَ بَنَانَهُ, right? Which means, do the people think we're not capable of, I forget exactly what the word is, but it says, basically God's asking a rhetorical question. He says, does humanity think that I'm not capable of creating them, resurrecting them? Because we're talking about the day of judgment and, the time of resurrection, this and that, and whatever it is, and, life and death and everything. This is the sort of theme of the chapter. Bala qadirina ala an nusawwiya banana makes a reference to the fact that bala means certainly, qadirina ala an nusawwiya banana means I'm certainly capable of restoring even their fingertips, their fingerprints, right? Meaning that if you burned your fingerprint off or sliced off a little bit of your finger, you will find that you are still able to unlock an iPad or tap on an iPhone 6 and it will unlock to your fingerprint because even that tiny little detail on your fingerprint was preserved by this creator. And that is one of the scientific proofs of the religion that I abide by. So if you'd like to do more research, this is known as Surah, chapter, Qiyamah. Please go do your own research. Okay, third trimester. The third trimester has continued rapid growth, lots of CNS development, brain development, things like that. And the fetus has less space. That space restriction sometimes scares parents. Yes, dad in the room. Did you realize that as time went on, the fetus was maybe moving a little bit less, kicking a little less?
Yes. In fact, wife got induced because of the lack of movement.
It's crazy, right? So as time goes on, it's possible that the baby sort of just you can sort of, the mothers can sometimes feel them rotating or moving an arm, moving things like that. As time goes on, that space becomes compressed. The baby grows, and as sort of less space to move. That can be quite scary, right? So this is something that happens in the third trimester as well, right? Birth is a very complicated process. And it's one of the things that we are not entirely able to explain yet, right? The way that childbirth actually begins, right? But the one thing I want to make reference to, and the one thing that the MCAT makes reference to quite a bit, is the fact that childbirth is one of those pathways of what that you need to know. Positive feedback. You need to know a lot of negative feedback, but you need to know positive feedback because there's one specific instance of this that they really want you to know. So let's talk about childbirth for a moment. Let's say that the childbirth has already begun, right? Because we don't really know why it happens. So where's my scarf? As the baby's head presses on the outlet of the vaginal canal, right against the cervix, this contraction, uterine contraction, because the uterine is a muscle, huge layers and layers of muscle that pushes down on the fetus, and hopefully the head is in the right position. It starts to push. That uterine contraction leads to cervical what? Dilation. You will hear a lot. She's X centimeters dilated. She's X centimeters dilated, right? And that's very uncomfortable process by which they check that. They literally have to do a manual cervical exam every time. So they have to check with their fingers to see how dilated the cervix is. Very painful, very uncomfortable, right? Cervical dilation. Cervical dilation actually sends a message to the hypothalamus, which sends a signal to the what pituitary? Posterior pituitary. Which releases oxytocin, which stimulates uterine contraction. And that uterine contraction causes cervical dilation, which causes oxytocin, which causes uterine contraction, cervical dilation, oxytocin in a positive feedback loop. This goes up and up and up and up and up until the time that the baby is pushed out, right? Another thing is, when a baby is pushed out, you really just sort of push the head and shoulders out. Once the head and shoulders out, baby just goes just straight. It's like a little nosedive. Comes right out, right? Which is crazy because this labor can be up to 10, 12, 15, 20 hours if you have a contracted period of labor. It's crazy. 1? Wow. Look at that. That is the power of induction. All right, now.
So you said you didn't know how birth is started, but we can induce it.
We can induce labor by inducing uterine contraction. We don't know how it starts naturally. We don't know what the natural signal is to begin labor. We don't know why. Okay. And what happens over time, you have a certain level of oxytocin, right? Oxytocin, cuddle hormone, sex hormone, intimacy hormone, everything. Happens when you hug a friend. Happens when you are sitting by a bonfire and laughing. Happens after you have sex with your partner. Happens after you, cuddle with your dog. Happens after you birth to a child, right? Oxytocin levels are like here, and the maximum anyone has ever felt is here, and the maximum this mother's about to feel is like here, right? So it's going to go and go and go and go and go and go until the baby comes out, and that's why the moment the baby comes out, you form this ridiculous, extreme emotional bond to this potato-looking thing that literally looks like a little alien. Oh my God, the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Meanwhile, you're showing me a literal smear of red fluid, right? It looks absolutely abhorrent. I'm so sorry, but your baby looks like a wet, soggy, like rotting potato. I do not want to see that. Bro hasn't even opened his eyes yet. They're like, oh my God, he has his father's eyes. Like, I sure hope not. Like, is dad blind? Like, are you guys okay? Are we okay? Clearly we're not, right? And the thing is, on a serious note, that's really traumatizing. That's really sad. This is really sad. Which is why oxytocin works closely with another hormone called prolactin. And this oxytocin-prolactin interaction actually allows for breastfeeding and the suckling response and this and that and everything. And they kind of like, I don't exactly know the mechanism by which it does this, but they kind of feed off of one another. So by breastfeeding and continuing to breastfeed and things like that, you actually keep the oxytocin levels to like a relative, good rate. And it's also just good for the mother-child bond, things like that. We have seen, and it is evidence-based, that mothers who don't breastfeed have trouble with their children. Like they struggle a little bit more with like that sort of bond formation, things like that, in an observable manner, right?
Is that important to know, like the relationship between the two?
No, this is just something I threw in there for you to remember, like all of this.
So if the prolactin levels are kind of, you're saying they're higher.
Yeah.
Does that cause a decrease in what is it called, dopamine?
I mean, I would assume so. Well, hold on, because I would assume so, but like I wouldn't say like they're gonna have any sort of like dopamine withdrawal symptoms because there's like so much other things going on here. You know what I mean? Like the thing is, sometimes when you look at physiology, especially when you're looking at patients who are sick, like think of pregnancy. I don't want you to actually think of it like this, but think of pregnancy as a disease state. Everything's changing. And everything's changing for this one specific reason, that you have this abnormality inside of you. When you are looking at the physiology of people who are not healthy, it's not normal. You can have a patient with COPD whose blood pH is like 7.2 and they're just walking around like having a casual day. I had a patient with chronic hypertension. Dude had systolic blood pressure in the 220s, was normally speaking to me. These people don't have normal physiology. Don't expect normal physiologic responses from people who don't have normal physiology. This is about as abnormal as physiology gets. When it comes to abnormality, this is abnormal.
For the normal person.
Yeah. Are you pregnant? I'm not pregnant. I can tell you that this is not normal. Hey, see me after class. Okay, so I think that's it from me, unless people have questions. This was a doozy. Very hard lecture. Hard lecture to teach, hard lecture to follow. Next week's a lot easier. We're going to do chapter 4 and chapter 6, because chapter 5 we will do in 1 2.5 hour seating. Chapter 5 is a long one. And the thing is, like, I did give a prerequisite lecture so that you guys would understand it a little bit better. That doesn't mean I'm going to teach it any differently. Because no matter whether or not I give a prerequisite lecture, people are going to struggle with it the same amount. It is a very, very, very hard chapter. By the way, I will not be here on Thursday. I'm going home. I'm going back to New York. It's my dad's birthday soon. So I'm going back to New York. I will be back on Sunday morning. I will go to class, and I'll come and I'll teach you on Sunday afternoon. Okay? So we will have lecture again next Sunday in this room. Thank you guys so much for watching. Bid you farewell. Take care.